Euston Station in London. The passenger is Andre Previn, conductor of the London Symphony Orchestra. He's travelling to the north of England to find out for himself about one of the most extraordinary musical activities to have developed over the last 150 years, the British brass band.
I'm really fascinated by the brass bands in this country. I have been ever since I came here. But I must admit to you straight away that I know absolutely nothing about brass bands. I mean, why did they start? How did they start? How many of them are there? Could you compare a brass band here with, say, a concert band in America? How can you call the players amateurs? For mind you, none of them play for a living, when the standard of performance is as high, or frankly, sometimes higher, than quite a few of the professionals I could name. Now, all these questions, and many, many more, I want to find the answers for myself. And that's why I'm sitting here in this train, heading up to the north of England, where most of these brass bands got started, way back in the early part of the 19th century. I'm going to go see two typical bands, alike in composition, but different, totally different in character. One is in Lancashire, one is in Yorkshire. Now that's already totally different, especially if you happen to live there. Both bands share the distinction of being listed in Grove's famous Dictionary of Music, and both were formed in the very early 1800s. The one in Yorkshire is Black Dyke Mills, and the one from Lancashire, which is where we're going first, is called Besses of the Barn. Now, this book is a history of that band, and moreover, it's a history written in 1892. Can I read you the first paragraph? It says, "Delightfully situated on the Turnpike Road, about 5 miles from Manchester on the one hand, and 4.5 miles from Bury on the other, stands the quaint old Lancashire village of Besses of the Barn, now comprising about 2,000 inhabitants, but which, at the date of the commencement of this history, nearly 100 years back, and don't forget they mean 100 years back from 1892, was simply a small hamlet of not more than a dozen tenements." Well, here we are in that quaint Lancashire village that I mentioned to you before on the train. Behind me is Bess's Bandroom. Now, how did it get such a wonderful name? Well, there are a couple stories. There used to be a pub down the road, a pub shaped like a barn, and it was run by a very good-looking Lancashire lass called Bess, or Bessie, and the locals used to nip down there to see Bess and have a lunchtime drink. Now, the village grew up around the pub, and the name stuck. Now, if you don't like that story, there's another one, and that is that Dick Turpin used to stable his horse called Black Bess at the barn after a day or two of hard stand and delivering. But it doesn't matter whether you like one story or the other. The name of the band is Besses, and they rehearse here upstairs. Bess's guest conductor is the horn player Ifor James, who's rehearsing a piece that you perhaps wouldn't normally associate with bands. It's by Howard Burrell, and it's called Occasion.
Crescendo. Yes, second bass is on that. You should be on the fourth beat. Okay? Just that. Let's take it once again from A, can we? In this chattering bit, it might be an idea if everybody tried to make it a little bit clearer and perhaps a little slower, so that you really get this chattering effect. 2, 3, 4, 5, sixth of A. 1, 2, 3.
The bandsmen here are all amateurs. They work during the day, leaving evenings and weekends free for rehearsals and concerts. It's a pretty full-time occupation. Well, how then do members of bands like this acquire such a high standard of sophisticated musical training?
I think some of them take private lessons in any case, but I think this band has picked it up simply because I brought it to them.
So there has to be a catalyst?
I think there has to be a catalyst. Yeah, let me go right up to that. off. Lancashire and Yorkshire are very brass band minded, especially they have retained it. Many years ago, of course, in the northeast there was tremendous around Durham, Dereham, Newcastle. There were hundreds of bands there, and it has spread to the south, round Gloucester area, Bristol. There's a good band. In south of Wales, there were a lot of good bands at one time. There still are some good bands there.
But you mean there are less now than there were, let's say, turn of the century?
I think so, yes, because even in my youth, we used to go across to the Durham Miners Guild, and you'd get anything up to 200 bands there, marching and counter-marching and playing in fields and playing. Now, if you go there, you'll maybe get 20 or something like this.
The Besses concert, which I attended in Middleton Civic Hall, suited the audience just fine. The program ranged from the very modern to the very traditional, and it included Elgar's Chanson du Matin. The conductor is Edward Gregson. According to the records, Besses started as a reed band in 1818, and in 1821, the year of George IV's coronation, they won what must have been one of the first contests ever, playing, of all things, as a test piece, God Save the King. Their glorious years were with the famous conductor Alexander Owen, who not only led them to numerous championship victories, but took them all around the world as well. The orchestra is very keen on its history, and they have a right to be. It goes back a long way, and it's illustrious. We found a lot of old photos that we thought you'd like to see. Now here's a very early one, still undated, of the band, and quite obviously this was a tour sponsored by a bowler hat company. Now here's a photo we like, undefeated in 1898, and they've graduated into uniforms and a lot smaller hats. Here's a photo from a tour they did in New Zealand, they think. That's what they think they remember. And they ran into a local band there that was quite evidently entirely comprised of horn players. And this one's nice. The complimentary picnic tended to, if you note, the royal Besses of the Barn Band, and that's because at that time they came under the royal patronage of King Edward VII. Here's a picture with 3 civilians in the middle, and they were visiting the Houses of Parliament. Here's a more recent one of the boys' band, and this is interesting because it's from the boys' band that the senior band recruits. The boys' band have won a whole lot of awards and contests, and there's a lad in the band right now whose grandfather was in the World Tour Band of 1908. And here's the certificate of incorporation in 1887, when the band was formed into a limited company. And that is the year, 1887, in which they bought their present Bandroom, which you saw before, that they're still practicing in. In the Bandroom, Ifor James introduced me to Edward Gregson. And look who I found, my old friend from the LSO, John Fletcher.
My goodness, yes. To see each other at Besses of the Barn is quite something.
Last time was in North Carolina. Yes.
Yeah, we can't go on a meeting like this.
No. That was a much smaller rehearsal hall than this. Yes. Well, I've got millions of questions about this, but I won't get in the way now.
Okay, fine.
Right. Can we try and take it from the beginning? First movement. Just try and read through the partition.
Just before the rehearsal began, I chatted to Ifor James and the band's permanent conductor, Frank Bryce, and they told me about the Tuba Concerto, specially commissioned by the Arts Council from the young composer, Edward Gregson.
John, would you like to... Is there anything in that movement that you'd like to... No, not really. When I first started writing for the brass band, which was about 1969, there was little, and it so happened that at the same time a lot of other contemporary composers sort of became interested through various reasons, mainly through commissioning, in writing pieces for the brass band.
John, the piece you're playing tonight, Edward Gregson's concerto, it's a premiere. Is it also a premiere in a different way? I mean, is it the first time a tuba concerto has been written for a band?
Well, to the absolute best of my knowledge, yes. There are several tuba concertos with orchestra, but as far as I know, there is nothing of this scale ever written for a band. It's a very, very good thing. I mean, this is my first occasion playing with a band, in fact, is sitting at the wrong end of it, playing the solo part. But I'm hoping very much that this concerto, although it's fairly nippy, will encourage tuba players in bands to really have a shot at it.
Can you explain something terribly basic? I have a hell of a time following this because things like trombones in B flat, and then this is
Right.
This is now 2 octaves up in B flat.
Yeah, that's right.
Everything's in treble clef.
Everything's in treble clef. The only one that really makes sense is the bass trombone.
Bass trombone, sure.
Yeah, that's right.
But why is everything in treble clef? Why is it easier?
For a start, it's a tradition. It started very much with the working class man in the turn of the century, and the fact that all the instruments were written in treble clef made it much easier for them to transfer from, say, a tuba to literally a solo cornet, and he would have no change of fingering whatsoever.
Where did you get your background, for instance, for this?
Well, in fact, I started by writing a brass quintet, and I was then, shortly after I left studying music, was asked to write some brass band music. And it didn't come easily at first. I found the same sort of problems. But once you get into the swing of it, like most things, it actually comes much easier.
Do you have anybody then that writes them out normally and just hands them to a brass specialist and says, here, change this for me?
I think there are some serious composers who have been commissioned to write brass band works have in fact written short scores and passed it on to an arranger. Is that not right?
Oh, yes.
This is a transposition.
This is the Bandroom.
Bravo. What a good idea. Bravo.
This is the terrible man who drinks the lemonade.
Do you get this in LSO breaks or not?
No.
No.
No, we don't. We don't.
Not as good beer as this.
No, cheers.
We better not be seen doing this.
No, quite no. No, well, nobody's looking. It's all right. What was, or what is with other bands not quite as up to date with things, what is a normal brass band repertoire?
Well, I would go so far as to say it's fairly much, you can say it must have a march or 2 marches, a hymn, a Gilbert and Sullivan selection, perhaps a selection from Oklahoma or something like this.
Shows.
Something from the shows.
So these are all
and
arrangements.
Perhaps a test piece.
And is it...
And arrangements, yes. Nobody in this band, I'm happy to say, takes a penny. And I think it's absolutely fantastic when you think of the things they do just for the love of going to play to people. And you can see it when you watch them play. They're thoroughly enjoying themselves.
Sorry, so we have to stop it. I'm not quite happy about the phrasing on it.
I've been throwing around this sort of Guinness Book of Records statement that I'm the only professional brass player that I know of who never ever played with a brass band. I have absolutely no connection. In other words, I'm a complete imposter in these circumstances. But it's very much an advantage in that it develops strength, endurance, and the ability to play with others and to sort of blend. In other words, I do think that in some cases, particularly the bass end of a band, restrictions are sort of placed, for better or worse, on players as to the possibilities of the instrument.
I'm trying to get the band to get its foot into all sorts of worlds. Obviously, they have and have had for many years their normal type brass band concerts where they go and play arrangements and things, and they're all happy concerts. I'm now getting them into another world of universities and music clubs and serious things. We've been to Queen Elizabeth Hall 2 weeks ago, new commissions.
The interest which has been shown has brought the brass band really to, I think, tremendous heights of amateur music making. I think that's what it's all about, and personally that's what really interested me, because it was a challenge, because there really wasn't any musical repertoire, and therefore it was really quite an exciting venture.
I think it must be one of the most unique and most advanced forms of folk music, if you like, in the country.